We are at the top of the hexagram. Today we are going to explore the sixth line of gate 40, and it is called Decapitation. This is my line in gate 40. When we get to the sixth line, we get to the end of the process. Now, the sixth line will go through its third line phase, of course, its trial and error phase, and it does that in approximately the first 20 or so years of its life. It gets its fingers burned and then it withdraws, goes up on the roof or it climbs up on the mountain, and it stays out of things. It gets its reputation for being aloof. It's the recluse. And yet there is always the capacity for our six lines to be administrators, to administer their wisdom to everybody else from that elevated perspective. Whatever the description of the sixth line is, you live it out quickly when you're young, whichever gate we're looking at it through. And once you've lived it out when you're young, then you often avoid it almost entirely for the rest of your life. It's like with a 59-6. It has a lot of one-night stands up until about the age of 18 to 25, that kind of time frame. And then they may very well be celibate for the rest of their lives. It's that burning can be so intense for a sixth line that they just don't want to revisit that again. But you live it out, and the moment you realize what it is and just, whoa, what it is, then you think, okay, done, I'm enough. I've had enough of that. Six lines we've talked about before are never really part of the hexagram. They sit on top of that roof with their different perspective. They have a perspective that takes in more than just that gate that they are sitting on top of. And it takes in more than just the channel that the gate is part of. And it really is also, it's the entire circuit. Six lines have a very, very big view. And the 40, line 6, is looking at all the possibilities of tribal circuitry. And then on top of that, we also have the fact that our six lines are transitional lines. So they are always moving on a track to something else. So you can't ever expect the sixth line to respond in the way that the rest of the lines do. The sixth line is like a cosmic fence sitter. In this particular context of the community or the family, the overview line or the lifetime learning, it says the necessary destruction of inferior forces in positions of power before liberation can take place. So this is that lifelong process of removing those from your life who would prevent you from resting. Now, who are these people to keep making demands on the ego? Who do they think they are? You can imagine the 40, line 6 sitting on the roof of their house when they're young, and they look into the garden and they see their family is all sitting there, and they can see from a very young age which ones really can make a good bargain, which ones really shouldn't be in any position of power at all. They can work it all out. They can see who's going to put pressure on the willpower to do just a little bit more work. Just doing one thing more, or just do this before you go. You just keep on keeping it on, keeping that pressure on, making that willpower work. And these are the inferior forces. They do not belong there in terms of this, in context of this 40. The will, the ego, it's an incredible thing if it's treated properly. But if it's not, it can be very destructive. The mantra of the sixth line in the 40th gate is, it's unfair. The 40, line 6 child, they're slightly removed from the family. They're the ones who are watching, and they're seeing how everybody is behaving, the bargains that they're making. They're listening to all of these things play out, and they get into all sorts of problems with their parents because they will go up to them and say, well, that's not fair. I don't like the way that you did that. Oh, that didn't play out the way you said it was going to do. If you're going to make a bargain with a 6th line, 40, line 6 child, then make sure you live up to that side of the bargain, because they're not going to forget about it if you don't. And they will hold on to that energy of, it's not fair. Why did you do that? It's not fair. And it's a theme that actually runs through the whole channel, because the whole channel of community also has the bargain running through it. So it does, keeps that influence going all the way through. A bargain that is broken or mistreated is, that's the thing with it, it's unfair. And it's a projector channel. So the bitterness that comes through, or the resentment that comes through on a bargain that is not taken care of, can be really quite strong. In the exaltation, we have the authority coupled with the magnanimity. Oh, I always travel with this word. I should just choose a different word, really, shouldn't I? To remove from power only those who deserve such drastic treatment. The power and authority of the ego to reject individuals in legitimate. I think must someone else's teeth in today. Right, hold on, I take it back a bit. The power and authority of the ego to reject individuals in legitimate defense of the group. Okay. So much of the language in this whole hexagram has been about negative forces. The sixth line talks about inferior forces, similar sort of thing. The demands that the negative forces make on the will are legitimate, but they're not very good for the will, and not good for the ego. And so they become negative in that sense. Inferior forces, on the other hand, they make demands that are unfair, that are unnecessary, that are unreasonable. And these are the ones that have to be removed from power, or at least taken out of the sphere of the 40th gate. And this is the gift of the sixth line, because they can spot them. So in those early years as children, they get into so much trouble, really using that genetic gift they have to establish what is right, what is wrong, what is the bargain within the family. And yet they have no power to do anything with that, because they're a child. These are not matters for children. These are not questions that adults want to be faced with. They don't want to have to justify their actions to a child. And so the children quickly get burned. And what they learn over the course of their lifetime is that every time they announce that something is useless or unfair, or something doesn't have the right bargain, and that they're not going to join in with whatever it is until that's fixed, well, this often then presents them with a lot of trouble, and they end up being isolated, and they don't join in with things. They can walk into a room full of people and they can look at the way that the structure is operating, and very, very quickly they can see that something is not right. They're not going to be able to tolerate the way that that has been set up. Something is off. It is a gift, but it's a gift that comes with a price. In the detriment, we have exemplified by the terror of the French Revolution, where the idea of who's deserving of punishment was cruelly extended to an entire class. The distortion of the ego through power and authority. So we're dealing with the tribe here. It's like, how dare the government tax me until I'm dead? This is unreasonable. This is unfair. They are an inferior force, and they are destroying my society, my family, my life. They are taxing my willpower to the point where I cannot function anymore. So it's not about negative forces anymore. This is now an inferior force, because they're making claims, and there's a bargain there that's been made with the will, and it's unfair. You work hard for your family. Now, the gate 40 is going to work very hard for your family, and then you get promised a reward, and you go home and there's no reward. Hey, well, that's not very fair, is it? And the sixth line learns very, very early that a lot of people operate that way. But you go up onto the mountaintop and you find the 40, line 6, and you say to them, can you tell me whether this is a good leader or not? Whether this is a good bargain or not? And they're going to tell you straight out what they think. They're going to say, well, you're messing around with this or that, that's not going to work. Unless you're straight with that, that's not going to work. And they will go straight for the jugular. Decapitation. Take it away, straight away. And there's a real cleanness to that, actually. It can be very helpful in this society where people just sort of soft soap, and they don't want to say what they think, and they don't want to upset anybody, And a 40 line 6 isn't going to be like that. They're going to say, no, this is how it is. And that can actually be really liberating. Ra said that it's very difficult for a 40 to have a productive material or sexual life unless it can have the necessary rest that is inherent in the bargain. At the moment that the bargain is not fair or is perceived to be not fair, it will do everything in its power through its ability to deny, because it's the gate of denial, remember, it will do everything it can to make its partner so uncomfortable that they will give up on the bargain. It's like pushing them out, pushing them out, pushing them out. They don't want to be the ones to say the bargain is over, because, you know, they made the commitment. It's not good for the ego to break a commitment. Somebody else breaks the commitment. Yeah, okay. All right, you can be bitter about it, but at least you didn't have to break it. If you're in business with someone, you have a client maybe who's got a defined ego, if you're able to find that kind of thing out, then keep in mind the importance that for the work that that ego person brings to you, they must have the right amount of rest, and they must have recuperation, and they must be recognized for what they do. And then the work that they do will be valuable both to them and to everybody else. You know, they'll be able to see as well that there is a path laid out for them where they can do less work, get more rest. Yeah, that's the right way around, isn't it? Less work, more rest, so that the ego can be happy. If an ego is treated properly, then everybody benefits from that. Yeah. So with kids are really good at being able to see a bargain that is correctly made and is not. And it's really important, I said this a little while ago, if you're going to make a bargain with a child, don't tread on it. You know, keep to what you've said. Don't misuse their will. If they're the ego one, don't misuse the will of a child. Don't misuse their energy, because it's a conditioning field. And it's so easy to get locked into that point where, especially if there's a sacral involved, conditioning them as well, then it can be really hard for them to hold on to that space where they take care of what they've got. When the ego is finally able to make a commitment, they end up having to go into the past. They end up having to find confusion. Oh, this is the next gate that we're going to, the gate of confusion. It's the gate 64. The bargain, this is what it's telling us, is the bargain is not the be all. It's not the be all and end all of life. The bargain is an aspect of the material plane that we live on, but it's not the whole story. They are essential though. Even though it's not the whole story, it's still absolutely essential to have our bargains. And the only way the bargain can really be understood is through hindsight, through history. We go back and we see how things worked with the bargain. What happens when there is no bargain? Feeling the confusion, seeing the experience of that, making sense of that. You know, the process of making sense of the past happens with gate 64 in its confusion, and then in gate 47, which comes after that, in the Ajna center, where realization takes place and sense is made of the whole process. So the grounding here is in gate 37, line 6, called purpose. There is a purpose to weeding out those people in your life who are going to take more or demand more than you have to give. Those people who don't allow you to rest, who don't value the bargain. No, it's not always easy to cut those people away and to chop their heads off. Perhaps this grounding can give some resolve to that process. You know, it can give it a purpose. The moon has been in gate 59 since 5:03 this morning. The sacral gate of sexuality, the ability to break down barriers to achieve union. And we know that it's a role gate. It gives us the bonding roles, the strategic bonding roles. No, the strategy for our bonding roles would be a better way of saying that. And it's something that we are all conditioned or experiencing through having it activated in our designs. And it was our gate as well, just before gate 40. So we're maybe familiar with what 59 brings to our experience. And then the moon moves into gate 40, where of course we still are at the moment, and that happens at 16:15. So that's a bit of a double bargaining community kind of hit. And then 64, which is where the sun is going, the moon goes there at 3:32 tomorrow morning, and this is called before completion. It's the gate of confusion. It's the abstract mental pressure to make sense of the memories of experiences of the past. It's a constant pressure. Yeah, it's a head center gate, because the memories come in without any apparent order to them, and it can be very confusing. But it's a natural part of the process, and it's a process that needs time to chunter along. Can't force a realization. You can't will, just in the gate of willpower, you can't will confusion to go away. And we'll be exploring more about this gate as we come into it tomorrow, as it becomes the sun transit. So that is the end of gate 40 for this year, in a way, you could say. I mean, certainly as being the lead for the sun. Other planets will go in and out. The moon will go into it every month, but this is our major focus on it for now. Thank you for joining me. I hope it has been of some value to you in your process and in your experience. I always find when I'm doing these that when I come across a line that I have in a gate, like I have the 40 line 6, that it can be really illuminating. It can be quite painful actually sometimes as well. But we bring these things out, we have a look at them, and sometimes they're not as bad as they were, if you know what I mean. Anyway, it's the end of gate 40. Thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in gate 64 tomorrow. So until then, as always, love yourself and go gently.